1935, the Lions win the NFL championship. The Detroit Tigers take the World Series. The Red Wings bring home Lord Stanley's Cup. Joe Louis begins his rise to world domination. This transforms the Motor City into Detroit, City of Champions.
All right, there it is with the crack of the bat. We are off and running. It is Detroit, City of Champions. I'm Jamie Flanagan.
Charles Avison.
And we're diving deep into the 1935 City of Champions season. It's a trilogy of books. It's a screenplay to be a movie on Netflix before you know it.
The greatest season in the history of American sport.
It is absolutely, without a doubt, man. So Charles, we've been Tigers, we've been Lions, and now we're like deep into the Red Wings. And I thought we were still in December, and you're like, no, dude, we're into March, February.
We're turning the corner. We're headed towards champions.
And we're battling with the Blackhawks, right? It's
Yes.
been a back and forth go-to all season with those freaking Blackhawks.
Yeah.
It's just been.
We spent a lot of time in previous episodes describing how, like, a lot of times we talk about these rivalries with these other teams, and we spent a lot of time talking about how the Blackhawks rivalry evolved.
Well, there is another rivalry that it's between Detroit City of Champions and the Man Cave Happy Hour.
Okay.
And the rivalry occurs is when we record a Man Cave Happy Hour before City of Champions, and Matthew and I are drinking like fish during that.
I wouldn't say fish. I would say we're consuming beverages.
And then I get on with you, Charles, and I try to play like a sober fella, but I'm not.
And I try to catch up to your guys' level.
So, all right, no, just teasing. But, yeah, no, so we recorded an episode of the Man Cave Happy Hour here at the Podcast Detroit Studios, downtown Detroit, at the Detroit Shipping Company. So thanks to everybody who's making noise outside the studio. The place is alive. It really is. It's warming up. It's a beautiful thing in the city. So, and if you're listening and you're not hanging out outside the studio, clamoring at the glass, like, subscribe.
There was a bunch of clamoring going on.
Leave a comment.
Like, subscribe, follow
me, you and me, Uncle Cracker. Give us a follow. But where we're at is, like, the whole season has been an up and down. The beginning of the season was really rough.
This season's got everything. I mean, that's why we've really taken our time going through it.
Yeah,
it's had everything.
So we're we're heading into the last quarter.
Final eight games.
Final eight games.
Yeah, it's a 48-game season.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
We know. We
were talking about it last week that we were moving towards the end of the regular season.
Right.
Here. And so just to give kind of a quick kind of overall of where we're at in the season, the season starts out for the first 13 games. The team is called the Hitless Wonders. They've got this all-star squad that they've been building up, but they can't score for worth their salt. And then after this initial phase, they go through what we were calling the orgy of victory, which was just a complete explosion of victories. And so they go, they completely flip the script and basically balance it out to the point where they rise up to first place on the exact same day that the Detroit Lions win their first NFL championship.
Right.
And it's the same day that Joe Louis is awarded the most outstanding athlete of the year by the Associated Press.
Yep.
So Detroiters that opened the
newspaper was
up,
just filled with.
That was the hinge upon the entire season, how it it rotated from the stories of the Tigers, Joe Louis, the Lions, and now all of a sudden the Red Wings are in the limelight. They're all lights are on them, because now, if the Red Wings can win this final championship, it's a clean sweep of major sports titles.
Yeah, because major basketball wasn't a thing. At the
basketball
time.
Basketball. They didn't have.
Was it even a college?
It was a college sport, but it was more akin to like there's an old video game called Bill Lambier.
Lacrosse at the time.
No. It was there's an old basketball. There's an old video.
Can
game.
you imagine basketball lacrosse?
Drink some water, dude.
This is. I'm sorry.
There's an old video game called Bill Lambier's Combat Basketball, where basically you could do anything you want in the game, and that's kind of how it was.
Combat basketball.
It was basically.
Wait.
Totally different type of rules in
that time. Let's bring that back. Combat basketball.
Combat basketball.
Go get it. It's a Super Nintendo game. Go get a copy, and we'll quiz you later.
Do you find the glitch in the corner is 3 points?
That's NBA NBA Jam.
All right.
All right. So with this, they're on the cusp of doing something.
So they go. Yeah. So
this could be a clean sweep.
Well, again, the Red Wings have. This is a team that we look at them as Hockey Town now, but in this era, they're struggling to get any seats, anybody in the stadium. Canadian fans are coming to watch Canadian teams beat the Red Wings, beat these the Detroit hockey teams.
I know what that's
like.
But
they've never really established themselves in the city. But now with all these other titles and all these other winners in the city, all eyes are on the Red Wings because they represent the final piece to what could become this clean sweep of championships throughout this whole season.
Olympia Stadium is full.
So now in the early season we talked about how when we talked about the hitless wonder period of the season, there's nobody there. There's like 4,000 fans at the games.
Right.
But then as they start to win, they roll into first place, and now all of a sudden the attention is on them. They start to sell out game after game after game. And so they're setting attendance records like every game. And so then we talked about how they went from first place, and the season kind of evolved into this dogfight where they were playing the Blackhawks, the two biggest rivals. They were playing the American division of the NHL, and so their two biggest rivals in this division are the Blackhawks and the Boston Bruins. And so both those teams had tremendous players, and so they went through this phase where they're playing against. They had a couple games against the Blackhawks, a couple games against the Bruins. And so, they came out of that still they dipped under first place for a minute. They came back up. So it was kind of going back and forth. And then we talked about last week how there's injuries came into play and how their minor league team, the Detroit Olympics, like how prescient it was, how big it was that Jack Adams had developed this winning mentality in his minor leagues.
A farm system at that, right?
Exactly.
It was a farm system in your back pocket.
And the farm team that actually played at Olympia, which allowed them to literally just shuffle players in and out of the lineup, especially if guys weren't playing well, they could drop them down to the Olympics. That's the name of the minor league team, was the Detroit Olympics. And they could shuffle them in and out of that lineup. And if guys got injured, especially, they had a ready source of up-and-coming talent they could literally just bring onto the ice, with the Red Wings.
Instead of bringing them down from Bay City or Grand Rapids.
Exactly, which would have taken much time. In this case, they literally just shuffled them out. So
Kalamazoo.
We titled the last week's episode the All O's line because they actually got to a point where their top line of Marty Berry, Larry Ory, and Herbie Lewis. Two of those guys went down with injuries, Herbie Lewis and Larry Ory. And so they were able to bring up they moved up a couple guys from their second line onto their first, and then they brought up these Olympics players. And then at one point, they actually had an entire line made up of minor league players that Jack Adams had developed, through this Olympics thing. So we called it the All O's line. It's a reference. I call it that just as sort of in reference to like how in the modern day.
Who was it? It was Charlie. It was Charlie. Who else?
No, for that All O's line. Yeah. We had Art Giroux.
Right.
We had Wilf Starr. We had Art Giroux at right wing, Wilf Starr at left wing, Wally Kilrea at center. And then Bucko McDonald at defense, and Ebby Goodfellow at the other defense. And then, of course, Normie Smith. And then Normie Smith at goalie.
Okay.
So it was all O's, including the goalie, had all come up through the O's. I mean, Ebby Goodfellow was the old, he'd been 4 or 5 years since he'd been in the O's, but the other guys
he was
were
part
fresh.
of it.
But the other guys were all fresh from the O's.
Yeah.
So, all
right. So where does that take us today?
So I call this episode today the Coup de Grace, which was this is the final leg of the season. So we're beginning with Game 40 out of this 48 game season, and so Game 40 begins with the return of Larry Ory. So last week the final game we talked about in last week's show was that Herbie Lewis had returned, and Herbie Lewis had this great game. And one of the big things that he did was he saved Ebby Goodfellow's life. In this when
that's right.
Toe Blake came down to head. Toe Blake was a rookie
with a stick, right?
Yeah, he swung his stick down. And Toe Blake ended up becoming an NHL Hall of Famer. He's one of the best players ever in hockey. But this was his rookie year. And he came down to hack Ebby Goodfellow with his stick. They say he swung it like an axe to split his skull. And Herbie Lewis came in just at the nick of time with his stick, and basically like a sword, deflecting another sword, glanced the blow, so it only barely clipped Ebby's head and saved his life.
Were they playing?
Are you not entertained?
I mean, and then
are you not entertained?
Yeah, so
there can be only one.
Yeah, so the result of the result of this was this wild riot at Olympia, where there's it's like the fans are pouring onto the ice. The owners comes out of the box. The owner got a couple of punches in on Toe Blake.
Wow.
It's that
you
kind of a
wish
thing.
the owners. You can see Mike Ilitch wheeling out before he passed on his wheelchair to go after somebody.
Well, a lot of times people think that like the 1930s are this dull black and white era where it's just kind of smaller guys and whatever. But it's completely untrue. As we've talked about throughout the whole course of this, it's like every other game. There's some massive battle royale riot. Jack Adams is going into the crowd after fans.
Yeah, and there's no plexiglass. There's
no
net.
Chicken wire.
And we talked about another week where Billy Rogel, who was a shortstop for the Tigers, he was at a game and he was in the front row and he got clipped with a stick in the face by he got too close to the action. He got hit in the, he got 4 stitches at a Red Wings game. He's the starting shortstop of the Tigers. So
even back then, they were supporting one another.
I
believe that is just
big
amazing.
Time. We've talked about how Joe Louis was at a minor league game and he was commenting on a fight with Wally Kilrea, fighting a guy who was like twice his size. So like Joe Louis was at the games. The game where the Red Wings moved into first place, the entire half the Lions team was there, and they were celebrating with the Red Wings in the locker room for because they had moved into first place, and like on the day that the Lions were winning the championship. So there was a massive interrelationship between these players from different teams on these. Going to games, supporting the teams.
But the Red Wings were the last piece of that puzzle.
They're the last piece of the puzzle, yeah. Right. And so not only were all eyes on them, which was very beneficial, but if they didn't win in this same season, it could have been massively detrimental because they were the ones that failed under pressure, so to speak.
Right.
And so that's why that's why this was so key. That's why that's drama. That's you can't. I mean, the people watching the games knew that they're like they have to win. This isn't like maybe hopefully they can win. This was like they have to win, or else they're going to be under the microscope for the negative reason. So anyway, so we start with game 40, and in this game, Larry Orey comes back. So now their top line is reunited: Larry Orey, Marty Berry, and Herbie Lewis.
This is January 1936.
This is March 6th, 1936.
Oh wow, okay.
So game 40, yes. And so they're so in this game against the New York Americans, who they called the Americs back then. So I'll just read just a little brief quote about the impact that Larry Orey had when he returns to the lineup. So of course, one of our favorites, our favorite hockey reporters, certainly Leo McDonald talks about in this here. So jubilant in the wake of an amazing smashing victory here last night, Jack Adams cup chasing Red Wings in all their glory moved on today to Montreal, where they meet the Maroons Saturday night. With Larry Orey returned to action, Detroit's scintillating first line performed brilliantly, scoring all 4 goals. Orey himself, with no evidence of a wrecked breastbone, led the attack with 2 goals. And so,
scintillating.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Orey scored from in front of the net, a goal which the two American players protested, claiming the Detroit player kicked the puck into the cage. And I'm just kind of going through this, a huge article. I'm just reading a couple of clips from it.
Was that when it was legal?
Not really. That's why they were protesting. Anyway, so it was a huge. You can see. So it was a huge game. They scored. So Larry Orey scores 2 goals in his return, assists on another. The top line scores all 4 goals, and they win the game 4-1. So it was a huge win. They just come back. Larry Orey's back. The top line is reunited. They're back in form. They're ready to roll, and everything's going good.
Don't call it a comeback.
Game 40, 4-1.
That's it.
So everything's go. So
it sounds all made in the shade.
It's all made in the shade. They're ready to just storm through. Right.
Yep.
Right.
But
not so much.
However,
not so much. Yeah. So
however, question.
So
mark?
what ends up happening is
game. We got a little dip. I'm looking at the game by game positioning, and we got a little. There's a peak.
Yes.
And
there's a valley.
We got a valley coming on.
A major valley. And so game 41 is a 3-5 loss to the Maroons. Game 42, Maroons. So Montreal Maroons, yeah. So game 42, a 2-5 loss to Boston at home. So they lose again. Game 43, a 0-1 loss to Boston, shut out by Tony Thompson, this goalie we talked about a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Best goalie in the NHL, shuts them out. So that's 3 games in a row they lose, and that puts them down. So they're only 1 game up over Chicago Blackhawks at this moment.
Them freaking Blackhawks,
yes.
man.
So game 44, 3-4 loss to New York Rangers. They lose 4 games in a row.
Holy crap.
The only reason that they're still hanging in is because the Blackhawks and Bruins. The Bruins have picked up a couple games from the wins they just had over the Red Wings, but the Blackhawks are also losing at this moment.
So it's a pretty thin margin at this
point. Now
it's
super thin because they're still only they're only a game up. Where they were up at one point, they were like they were winning. They get Larry Orey back. They have this huge win, and now they're coming down. And so game 44, there's a quote in this thing which I actually wrote down because I thought it was pretty significant because it kind of talks about at this moment. It wasn't just because goals weren't going in; they were playing terrible. And so again, Leo McDonald says. This Wings team, which played last night, was not good enough to win one of the old Pontchartrain Hotel shaving mugs, let alone a Stanley Cup. Wow. So they're talking about this. It wasn't just bad. They just goals weren't going in. They're just literally playing terribly.
And I'm looking at the graphic. 44 and 45, there was a small increase in production. Very small increase, right?
Well, I'll show you. So here's the thing. So one of the other things I wanted to mention here is that Adams. So like when things are starting to go bad, Bucko McDonald, this our fan favorite. We love Bucko McDonald.
Yes, we do, Bucko.
Yes,
Bucko's our
so
boy.
We love Bucko.
This hard hitting rookie defenseman. We love Bucko, and so early on in the season. Bucko is known for like the newspaper reporters loved him because he's like eating these ridiculous steaks and eating these huge hamburgers. He's like this big.
That's
got this
on the norm, right?
Yeah, he's got these big ears, so he's a huge personality. Everybody's loving him and writing all these articles how flattering and how funny it is that Bucko eats such big meals. But now when everything's going bad, it's like all of a sudden they're
Maybe
like
Bucko should lay off the steak.
There you go. Yeah, they're like Bucko's eating too much. He's getting too fat.
How about he skates on his blades, not his ankles?
So you can see, so you can see how this,
Sharpen those, would you?
So
double knot that.
Yeah,
crap.
we were talking about the Bender component. Yeah, so Bender's the guy that can't skate. So, but anyways, so Bucko now is there's this huge article about like it says Bucko is lectured by Jack Adams. He's like Jack Adams like he's going to eat himself out of the league. He's like trying to live up to this reputation that the newspaper reporters are giving him for being this crazy eater, big guy. And
I'm sorry,
so
I got to pull the Marvel out. Eat a salad.
Oh, there you are.
So
there you are.
Yeah. So anyway, so that kind of reflects like when everything starts to go bad, they're starting to kind of like they're talking bad about what's going on. Like these things that used to be fun and cute and whatever are now like look there's liabilities.
It's whimsical when you're winning.
Exactly. You put it perfectly. It's whimsical when you're winning, and now it's a detriment when you're losing. So that's like that's the mood of what's going on is that they're losing and they're going one of the reasons Bucko's eating his way out of the league. So once again, only losses by Boston and Chicago are what keep the Wings in this, and so they're still up a point. So it's the fact that these other teams are losing, which is only really the reason why Detroit's still hanging in there. So game 45, the Wings, it's a 1-1 tie to the Canadiens. And so game 46, so once again they're still hanging in there. They're up by I believe by 2 points. So anyway, so they go into game 46 and another loss, 1-2. They lose 1-2 to Toronto. So they're at home in front of the largest attendance of the season, 13,726 fans, largest attendance of the season.
And how many folks?
They lose 1-2.
How many folks?
13,000. So there's like standing. I mean, they're packing them in. There's so many people wanting to come into these games, and they're losing. They're losing game after game after game. So once again. So Tiny Thompson for Boston, the goalie, shuts out Chicago to help the Wings stay 2 games ahead. So they're actually picked up a game somehow.
Thank you, Tommy.
Yeah. So they're still hanging in, right?
Yeah.
So game 47 is the game of games.
Mm-hmm.
This is the final game against the Blackhawks for the season.
Holy smokes!
And so here's the situation. So the Wings are 2 games up on the Blackhawks,
right.
And the way it counts is that a win counts for 2 points, a loss counts for 0 points. So if the Blackhawks win this game, this is game 47. There's only 48 games in the season.
Right.
So a loss against the Blackhawks sets the Wings up to where the Blackhawks are tied with them going into the final game of the season. You see? So this is a major game. It's a must-win game. And plus, if we have that graphic which showed the from last week with the records of all these things. Don't use the graphic I showed you this week about the records, but the one that we used 3 weeks ago, or I think it was. Where it's got, anyways, the long and short of it was
the Wings and the Hawks.
Yeah, the Wings and the Hawks.
The Wings and the
Blackhawks. Yeah, because long and short of it was that the 2 teams they'd basically gone back and forth.
Oh I got the question mark there. Yep.
Yeah, so they were going back and forth. So like the Wings would win the first game, and then the Blackhawks would win the next game, and then go back and forth all the way through the season.
Yeah,
and to the point where they were literally their season series was tied 3-3. It was a 3-3 tie. They both had won 3, lost 3, and had 1 tie.
3-3-1. Yep.
3-3-1. Going into the final game where it's all the money's on the table, and we've spent a great deal of time talking about this massive rivalry between
and that's
these
coming
two
up
teams.
on the
so this
coming
is
up game 47.
The last best hope for it to be a trifecta plus 1.
Well, this is they're trying to get to the playoffs right now. You see,
yeah.
Okay.
And so so Boston and Chicago. This is a regular season. It's the conclusion of the regular season.
All right,
and
let's play this game.
Anything can happen in the last couple of games because because what happens is if the Blackhawks win, the Blackhawks move into tie for the Wings for first place, and if the Boston's nipping at their heels too.
Yeah,
then the Boston's nipping at their heels too. And so if Boston wins and the Blackhawks win, they both pass. They both tie with the Wings. Like in essence, a 3-way tie for first. Mm-hmm. If the Wings lose the final game of the season, these 2 who win, the Wings don't even make the playoffs.
Wow.
And they get knocked out by the Blackhawks, who 2 years prior had knocked them out in the Stanley Cup Finals.
So there's a lot of pressure on this game.
A ton of pressures, and they get knocked out from the City of Champions all in the running. It's
pressure,
huge.
I would say animosity.
Yeah. All right, so game 47.
They hate these guys, too. The coaches hate each other. The goalie of the Blackhawks is a former guy that was cut by the Red Wings. The owners are neighbors in Chicago that detest each other. I mean, they've been fighting for years. Blood and teeth on the.
Do we have
weren't there neighbors at one point in time?
Exactly. They're neighbors in Chicago, and they hate each other. Norris owns the building that.
Hey, turn your stereo down.
James Norris actually owns the building that the Blackhawks play in.
Oh, God.
And he uses that to rub their faces in it all the time.
Hey, turn on that phonograph.
Yeah, they hate each other. I mean,
turn that Victrola down, you son of a.
So this is the situation,
Yeah,
so this is the situation, and so I'm going to read just a couple little quick
take this away from
me.
A couple little quick quote stubs here. So Jack Adams is trying to explain why this Red Wings team has been slumping so bad. So once again, this is March 18th on by Leo McDonald. And he says, manager Jack Adams and Red Wings spent anxious moments around the telegraph operators in Olympia last night, awaiting returns from the game between the Blackhawks and the New York Rangers. When word came that the Rangers had beaten the Blackhawks, a huge smile spread across the face of Adams. Adams didn't cheer. So that right there, they're talking about how anxious they were. They're gathered on the radio because if they're
it hinges. It's like
if the Blackhawks had not been beaten by the Rangers in this game, they'd be tied already. You see what I'm saying? Like this is the sort of the before this. So now they got beat. Now they're still got an edge on Blackhawks.
So the next day,
game so now they're still up by 2. But this was a huge relief
when you're playing that team. It's a 2-game swing.
Yeah. So at the very least they have a little bit of a cushion that if they're so that it was big. So
it's my strong suit.
So that's what he's saying. So Jack Adams says that's something the Red Wing manager grown. Adams, a comparatively young man before the Red Wings started the disastrous road trip that ended Saturday night in Montreal, was ready for the Townsend plan after Toronto licked the Wings Sunday. It was the 6th game of the Red Wings had played without a victory. What is the matter with the Red Wings? Adams got it. The Wings themselves got it, and the newspapermen got it on their own on return from the recent trip. The slump is one of those inexplicable things that comes to most clubs, hockey, baseball, or passing the beanbag. The Red Wings today are just as good a club as they were a month ago. So they're just saying there's this horrible slump they've been in, and they can't really answer why.
Is passing the beanbag an allusion to football?
I don't know. I think it was
just any sport.
Yeah, any sport, like just a beanbag game.
Okay, fair play.
Like old-fashioned cornhole game or
monkey
something.
Balls or anything.
Yeah.
Right.
So anyways, and so this is.
I just wanted to say monkey balls.
So this is the hype article for this.
Hashtag man cave.
So this is the hype article from the upcing Hawks game that they're about to play.
Who is this written by?
Leo McDonald. Once again, he's
one of our favorites.
He's the you draw a lot from.
You draw a lot from him. So he was the sports writer for Detroit.
Yeah.
The most popular
one of them. No, he's
news?
one of them.
Was he the news?
When we get to Joe Lewis, when we start talking about the Joe Lewis, wait till you see how the article's by Bob Murphy. Bob Murphy's going to crack you up. Yeah.
But you've been quoting
because
he's their hockey writer.
We got Iffy. We had Iffy the Delpster who did a lot on the Tigers. What publication does McDonald work for?
So he is the Detroit Times.
Times, okay. Because the Times, you kind of almost wish the Times was still around.
Oh, absolutely.
Because in today's world, you'd almost need that type of writing to kind of cut through all the BS.
Absolutely,
and political correctness.
So they have all this. Yeah, they have all this really colorful writing where they're like, it's not the Red Wings won the game last night. They're like Red Wolves on the prowl.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Just color it up, man.
Exactly.
Bring it. You had to bring it alive. That was all there was.
Yeah, there was no.
There was
TV.
There was no TV. There was no.
Yeah, radio was in its infancy especially for hockey. So if you're trying to present this story where you're reading this action-packed adventure story through the whole thing, and some of them might be like colored up. Like maybe you're reading an article and they're like making it sound like these warriors of the ice lanes sharpening sticks and everything are heading up and down, but it brings color. It makes you feel like you were there and or at the very least that you wish you were there. You see.
So, but So he wrote this article about this game.
Yeah.
This is a pre or post game.
It's a pre-game. It's a hype quote.
Okay.
It's a hype quote for this massive game coming up. So the article title is called "Puck Classic Looms in Game with Hawks Tonight," and so a Red Wing hockey club which has faltered in the stretch drive for the National League pennant just as the bunting seemed in its grasp takes an arch enemy in the Chicago Blackhawks before a capacity crowd at Olympia tonight with a chance to clinch first-place honors. If it loses, the race will go into a tie between tonight's rivals. A point behind the Hawks and 3 points behind the Wings are the Boston Bruins, an outfit that has charged towards the top in recent games and which is all pepped up over the opportunity to sneak into the first-place spot before the regular schedule is concluded. The Blackhawks, like the Red Wings, have suffered recent reverses, losing to Rangers and Bruins in the last 2 starts. Thus, the Hawks are in the same mood as the Wings, and because both teams are anxious to redeem themselves, the game at the Grand River Ice Palace promises to be one of the most torrid of the season. In addition to the importance of the game to the two teams, there is quite a bit of feeling between the squads that has budded and flowered to the point which goes beyond mere enmity, whatever that is. So Clem Laughlin, manager of the Hawks, would rather win 1 game from the Detroit Pucksters than 4 from the other teams in the league. And Jack Adams, the Wings boss, entertains nothing but a burning desire to see his lads wallop the daylights out of the Chicagoans.
His lads.
I love to use the word wallop in an article.
But lads and wallop in the same sentence. Come on, man.
So
it's critical for both teams.
Yeah, and you can see it. Not only is it like adding besides that, they just don't like each other and would rather win 1 game against them than 4 against anybody else.
Right.
So it's just that's one of the things I've been trying to emphasize from the beginning. This whole thing is just this intent, this rivalry with them and how burning red hot it
So this is it. The game on the 19th is coming up. They wrote this on the 18th.
Game,
It's happening on the 19th.
And this is game number
47.
Game number 47 out
and
of
48.
There's
only 48 in the season.
Can you put that graphic back up?
I did. All right. There's the 40. Yeah.
If you go from 44 to 45, 46, and then you see 47.
Oh yeah.
Holy crap! That production.
Yeah. Well, that's the up and down in the standings. They're up 1 game, they're down 1 game, they're up this, and they're in the rising, falling in the standings. Yeah.
But just that.
So because it was a roller coaster. Because every book that ever talks about the 1935 Red Wings, they make it sound like they just went from coast to coast and just romped their way through it, and that was all there was to it. They had this great line, they were killing everybody, and it was way more to it. The drama behind it. That's why I say this could be one of the greatest. The whole thing with all the teams would be certainly one of the greatest. Like a mini series, I call it a sports epic with all the teams in it. But this Red Wings story itself is just, it's got everything. It's got injuries to the primary stars. It's got rookies like Bucko McDonald that come out of nowhere.
Right.
They've got rivalry with the Blackhawks. You've got these, some of the most legendary hockey players of all time that they have to overcome, like in Tiny Thompson with the Boston Bruins. You've got everything. And so,
what happens on the 19th?
So on the 19th, I'll read the article not the whole thing, but I'll read a stub article for it.
Who put this
once
down?
again, our buddy Leo McDonald.
All right,
yeah. So so the article comes out on the 20th, which means the game was on the previous night. So Red Wings today were the proud champions of the American Division of the National Hockey League. On the heels of a smashing victory over the Chicago Blackhawks 5-3 in a blazing game between 13,522 fans. Actually, I said that wrong. In a blazing game before 13,522 delirious fans.
Delirious, I like it.
Who jammed Olympia last night. So I'll just skip ahead because there's quite a bit to it. It says, right here. So it says, by clinching first place, the Red Wings earn the right to meet either Toronto or the Montreal Maroons, one of which will be the winner in the international section in the first of the league championship games, which get underway next Tuesday. So the little thing says Smith hurt, meaning Normie Smith. So the game was also marked by a remarkable display of gameness on the part of Normie Smith, the Detroit goalie, who was painfully injured in the second period when it struck in the groin by a puck off the stick of Mush March. After a brief rest, Smith, though suffering, resumed his post in the net. Between the periods, he was given medical attention in the dressing room, and after the games was still in pain and groggy. With Marty Berry, the smart Irishman playing a role in 4 of his team's 5 goals, Detroit's first line performed brilliantly. All 3 of the line, Barry, Larry Orey, and Herbie Lewis, turned in markers and each assisted in 1 or more. Mud Brunito, brought up from the Olympics, and Johnny Sorrell were the other wings who glittered in the scoring department. To young Brunito went the honor of inaugurating the goal-getting, punching the puck into the Chicago net in the fading moments of the opening period.
Nice.
He raked Sorrell's rebound to turn the trick with Caracas looking out the window. The alert Brunito came in fast from nowhere and caught the former Detroiter sleeping. As a red light flashed, a great roar boomed through the big amphitheater. The crowd didn't have long to wait in the second heat for another demonstration, Ori turning Barry's pass in front of the goal mouth into the net in a spectacular play in which Lewis also played a part, rushing the puck into Chicago territory to start a smart play. So here's the last little section. The third period was still young when Barry added to Detroit margin with a pretty tally. He finished off spectacularly in the wake of a whirlwind teaming with Doug Young the length of the ice. So that was sort of like a little brief overview of the game and some of the the highlights of the highlight moments.
So Mudd, right? He's one of the guys they brought up.
He's
new. He's new to the game. He's new to the.
He started out early in the season with the team.
Yeah.
Mud, his name is Madare Mud Brunito.
Yeah.
They called him Mud
because
because
pulled up a
Madare.
graphic
Yes,
you sent me.
yes. So they called him Mud. He was nicknamed Mud for most of his life because Madare.
Your name is Mud.
Yeah.
Backwards. That's dumb.
But that's with 2 Ds.
Yeah. So Mud Brunito. His name's. We will definitely get to him, but Mud Brunito would end up being inducted in the Red Wings Hall of Fame at some point in the future. But so he's going to play. So this is not some obscure player. He's obscure to us today, but
sure.
So
Mud
Brunito early on in the season had been one of the first guys that he'd been one of these guys that Adams brought from the Olympics. So we're like he's going to be from when the Olympics beat the Red Wings in the Intercity Series. He brought.
The farm team, the Olympics.
Yes,
right.
Because before the season starts, there's an intercity series between the Olympics and the Red Wings, and the Olympics beat the Red Wings. And one of these guys that they brought into the team was Mud Brunito because he was so good. Who
was he playing for the Olympics?
For the
Olympics,
Wings, yeah.
Okay,
so they brought him to the Wings, but he went through the first 20 games of the season without scoring.
And that hit list stuff, they're like,
and they dropped
send him down.
And so they brought him. They sent him back down. Yeah, and so now towards the end of the season, throughout this entire season,
injuries, whatever, they bring him back up.
No, he's playing fantastic. For the
so we need a little bit of that spunk.
Forward defense?
Yeah,
we need a little spunk.
Yeah. Yeah, well, so that's what they're saying is,
spunk.
yeah. So that's the thing this was not necessarily some injury replacement. Mud Brunito was playing fantastic. The O's at this point are 6 games up. In fact, they clinched their division either this night or the night prior to this. They're headed to.
Mud was playing
the final game.
Mud was playing fantastic for the Olympics.
Yes,
right. And then
he's playing so good that they brought him up right at the end of the year and started him against the Chicago Blackhawks.
All right, fair play.
He wasn't. I take that back. He wasn't in the first line, but he played.
Yeah, he played.
They put him in the rotation.
He put him in the rotation. He scored the first goal of this Blackhawks major important event.
And that's one of the genius parts of Jack Adams. He put a cog into what he's got going on, to really off-put what the Blackhawks thought the Red Wings are going to do.
And the systems of the two teams are so similar that he can bring up a guy that's playing well in the minors and slot them right into the system.
And it's the same house.
It's
the same arena.
And none of the other guys know what this guy is all about.
Exactly. So he's sort of a secret weapon, that kind of thing. But he was already on Adams' radar because early in the season he'd already started. He'd already brought him up. But then he wasn't scoring.
Up and down, back and forth.
Yeah. So at the end of the year, he'd have been playing so well with the Olympics. Who again, I'm going to mention one more time so everybody knows, the Olympics had just made the IHL playoffs, and basically the same day as the Red Wings. So the minor league team and major league team
the story
are
about
both headed to the playoffs at the same time.
Right.
So the both teams. So again, Mud Brunito is sent to the Red
Mud's
Wings.
Mud's got to keep 2 jerseys and 2 sweaters in his bag.
Yeah. So
you know what? You're not skating hard enough. We're going to have you skate even harder.
Yeah.
Mud, you got to go. You're going to play tonight. You got to play tomorrow. And you got to play tonight again.
Right.
Yeah. So Mud is going to basically this huge moment is going to presage another huge moment in a future. Probably the next episode we're going to be talking about it. But that's why I wanted to kind of introduce him a little bit because this is as big as this goal was. This is nothing compared to what he's going to do.
Oh, holy crap!
Right?
All right.
This is
in
nothing.
playoffs or
he
the
scored
finals?
the first goal.
We'll see coming up.
Fair play.
We'll see coming up. We've got to leave the listeners wanting more.
Just to tease it, he scored the first goal in the game with the Blackhawks.
The very first day he started the scoring.
Yeah.
He started the scoring. It's at a thunderous ovation. This rookie comes up and he scores this huge goal. So
all right, what else we got to cover tonight? What else?
This is the real.
So that was 47. There's only one more game of the regular season.
I want to read a couple little tidbits because there was this guy.
Yeah,
the article
what about
from
this game?
This was. The articles from this were huge, and so Leo McDonough had another thing that was sort of reporting on some of the other extracurriculars floating around besides just the game. There was a bunch of little kind of colorful moments.
You can imagine it's like it's like when the Wings are in the playoffs, right? And you go downtown and Bob over here is like Bob used to DJ at the Post Bar, which was like stumbling and vomit distance from Joe Louis Arena. And, when the city was alive with playoff hockey, it was alive. I mean, it was serious. It wasn't kidding around with. It was good stuff, right? I mean,
it was 300 people deep trying to get into that place
in a bar that's like 100-person capacity. 100-person capacity.
I learned this is what I learned. The place is closed, so I can talk about it now. But there used to be every time after a Red Wings game, the fire chief would just show up and there would be an envelope waiting for him with a beer and a shot. And the fire chief would slowly grab the envelope, drink his drink, and then slowly leave.
That's it.
And then, let the debauchery ensue.
That's it. The Post Bar, though, the Post Bar, part of like the 80s, the 80s and the 90s and the excitement of when the Wings were doing well in those seasons. It was a decided part of it. And when the city comes alive for a team, there's no stopping it.
Well, that's how this was, and that's why they actually acknowledged that in the article we talked about, like one of the first episodes we did this entire show.
And I love the graph.
Was how
graphs all the way.
They actually talked about how the fans had played such a major role in this because these fans are looking for something to get excited about in the middle of the Great Depression.
Yeah.
So as soon as these teams started to play remotely well,
we thought
the
our
fans
lives
turned
were
out
crap.
the fans turned out in droves, and it was like they went from one sport to the next. In their thousands. And so it was like they were engaged in every single sport at a time that, other sports and other cities were just, hockey was somewhat in its infancy, NFL was somewhat in its infancy, and yet these teams are getting thousands of fans showing out, and they're playing for something. These games are playing for something.
Because they were the last piece of that puzzle.
Well, in this case, yes, but I'm saying the fans went from basically sport to sport.
Right.
And so there's a writer early on that we talked about that actually, when they said this actually article was called "Upon What Meat Does Detroit feed that makes it so great in sports? Like, what is it? What made Detroit so great in sports? How were they able to do all these things? They were saying it was the fans that got behind these teams that really gave Detroit this advantage where they're every game they're like playing for something. They're getting excited, and the fans were really like that sort of X factor that helped them win these things.
The 13th man.
The 13th, yeah, exactly, yeah. So, anyways, a couple little tidbits from the game itself.
Yeah, more about the 47th game, right?
Yeah, so it says. So here's the article says the thing Ebby Goodfellow liked best at Olympia last night was Bob Clark's organ peeling out "Hail to the Victors" after the Red Wings' great victory over the Blackhawks. It sure sounded sweet, Goodfellow declared. So they're playing the U of M's fight song, the "Hail to the Victors" after the win, which was kind of a cool thing. So
all right.
U of M fans out there know that they're
okay, Mr. U of M down there.
So U of M, Dearborn, mofo.
Yeah,
so,
I won't say it.
No, seriously, it's like my fraternity brothers. We all went to Dearborn, and we get really pumped up about football.
So,
guys, we went to Dearborn. Relax, relax a little bit. All right, go ahead.
So we've got
I love they play.
So a huge Buckle McDonald hit. So it says Buckle McDonald all but put Trudell up in the rafters when he checked the Chicago player in the first period, and the crowd howled. So a monstrous check, I guess, was laid out. Like the fact that they would include him in this list of these different random things. So Buckle got a massive hit that just got the whole crowd going crazy. It said on the level, Kaplan. So they're talking about. It said Maurice Kaplan reported that he was hurried home from Detroit Tigers camp at Lakeland, Florida, by Charlie Gehringer. On the level, Kaplan said every time Gehringer heard the Wings loss, he all but broke down and cried. He's sure a bug, meaning a fan.
Wait. I'm sorry. Go back. He was in Lakeland, Florida.
Yes.
And he got hurried back.
Yes.
Because this is March. This is spring training, right?
Yeah, spring training.
How long did that take to get from Lakeland, Florida? Because
they know.
Back up to Detroit.
Yeah. So
how long does it take to? It's the Morse code. They got to get that down there.
Yeah. So I think he was relaying messages to Gehringer because he was such a huge Red Wings fan.
I mean, because it's not like, you have 100 channels. It's like, the Wings are playing on this channel.
And,
And it's like local radio, and that's it. And then there's like the news wire.
That's why I wanted to stop that. I'm like, okay, hold on a second.
And when I make fun, it's like Morse code. It almost was.
So it's adding a little more.
A step.
So it's adding another player to what we already know as these different fans and how we talk about half the Lions.
And the Tigers are watching from Lakeland. Oakland.
Yes,
Another
and
13th
especially
man.
Charlie Gehringer is a diehard Red Wings fan.
really? Is he?
Yes, that's what this is saying.
I love it.
That's what I'm trying to point this out. So Maurice Kaplan
We
reported
would just shut up
that
for
he,
a second.
Yeah, that he was hurried home from Detroit Tigers camp at Lakeland, Florida by Charlie Gehringer. On the level, Kaplan said, every time Gehringer heard the Wings lost, he all but broke down and cried. He sure is a bug. And a bug is a 30s reference for a fan. That's how the word fan even started. Was like it evolved from the word. I don't know. Don't ask me the exact.
They hurried him
Bugs
home.
became fans.
They hurried him home from Lakeland, Florida, to Detroit.
The information.
The information. I don't think.
Okay. I'm like,
he wasn't
I was
They
thinking
hurried
in
the
person.
information from Detroit to Lakeland. So
I was thinking in person. My bad.
Yeah. So at the end of the game, Doug Young snared the puck and tossed it into the crowd as a souvenir. So
there goes a happy fan.
Could you imagine if somebody actually resurfaces with that puck and says, like, I have this puck from the Chicago Blackhawks game? Like, if you caught that puck, like, why would you not why would you get rid of that?
How would you document it?
This
It
is
doesn't
my
matter.
great grandfather.
You know why? Listen, I would tell you why it doesn't matter. Okay, because nobody's ever
Who's going to relinquish that?
No, let me make my case for this.
All right. Lean into the microphone. Make your case.
So of all the games in the history, we've already acknowledged the idea that this 1935 Red Wings team is basically forgotten.
Yeah.
Okay. Whenever you read a Detroit history book on the Red Wings, there's virtually nothing in there.
Everybody's original six. Original six.
No,
didn't even start until the 40s.
But for the widespread, mainstream Detroit sports world, the Detroit Red Wings season of 1935 is virtually unknown.
Right.
They barely know that it even happened, let alone the story behind it. Okay.
And I'm going to be totally honest with you, Charles. I am one of those people. I had no idea about this story.
Yeah,
So
nobody
that's
does.
why I'm sitting here and listening, and not getting sleep at this point in time. So.
Yeah.
I want.
What I'm saying is, when I say this, that's what I'm trying to say. This season, this entire season was completely forgotten. But specifically, this 1935 Red Wings season, and just the fact that it even happened. Okay, there's none of these players' names are hanging in the rafters of Joe Louis or of Little Caesars Arena.
Correct.
There's a celebration of the season is basically reverted. Is the only thing you get maybe is the date, on this date they won this thing. There's only two stories that they ever talk about out of this. The longest game ever, and that's it. Actually, the longest game ever is pretty much the only story you ever hear from that comes out of this story, or the fact that they won the cup at the end of the thing. But the drama from this entire season is completely forgotten. All the stars from the season are completely forgotten.
Right.
So that's what I'm trying to get at is if somebody came in, or if you saw somebody
that
said, "I've got this puck," if you were somebody that
it's got to be somewhere.
If you caught that puck at that game, you would know what a major big deal was to own that puck, right? And so for all of your descendants, when you pass, you would tell them, you would say, no matter what happens, this is the greatest puck of all time.
Do you see this watch?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just like that. This. And so if somebody came forward,
Matt loves the throwback.
If somebody came forward and said,
another episode.
If somebody came forward, usually what would happen is you would write using a pen, you would write
that
on
would
there
hurt,
what it was,
though.
where that puck came from.
Would hurt.
A puck would
A puck would
no,
hurt.
but Charles, no, but I defer to the plaque, right? The Champions Day plaque, and how that got just knocked out of existence, and got sold in a garage sale for $30, right? Mm-hmm. So I could very well see somebody had this puck and treasured it for a while, but then it just went away.
Yeah,
right?
What I'm trying to say is that this is something that's such a specific moment in time.
Right.
Why would you claim this puck from that game?
Oh, I mean, if somebody came back
That's what I'm trying to say.
If somebody came back now and said, "I have this puck,"
if somebody came forward and said, "I have a puck that from the game 47 of 1935 that my grandfather caught in the crowd," it's such a specific moment in time that nobody's really knows about. Or would give a crap about. Now,
I would believe
that.
them.
That's what I'm saying. I would believe them based on that specific.
If they had some information to back it up, but here's what I'm saying:
that their grandfather's from Detroit and he was alive in 35.
No. But here's what I'm saying:
yeah.
I'm saying it could very well have disappeared too, and just
been
thrown out in a box of all this horse poop,
Sure.
and just threw it out.
Yes, exactly. I get it. No, there's just like anything could be thrown out.
He's going to squeak behind you there for a second, real quick.
Sure,
but I can see that that's uncomfortable. We'll fix that. But sorry, no, you're good, man. So, but the plaque, it got posted in a school. You're good. and then it got sold when the school was getting destructed or demolitioned. They took the plaque out of it, and then the plaque went to a family, and then from the family, it was sitting out in the open getting rained on in a garage sale. And then, good God, so to imagine that this puck is probably lost is actually it's just kind of a sad thing,
Yeah, definitely.
But, all right, so where are we at?
So where we're at is the Red Wings win the game. And so
all right.
it's, yep, So anyways, yeah, so the one more game of the season, game 48.
All right.
Red Wings win the game 7-2. They go on to the playoffs. That's all I got for today.
So the last game ended up 7-2.
Yep. Game 48, season over.
Who are they facing?
Montreal Maroons.
Did it matter? I mean, was it going to be a shift whether they won or lost?
No, they're at this point they've basically locked up the American Division Championship.
So they kind of had it locked on 47.
47
with
was
the win.
Thing. Yep, 47 was the thing, and then the American Division finished with a 3-way tie behind them in second place with the Blackhawks, Bruins, and Americans all finishing second place, tied for 3, tied for the second place, and they all had to play basically a small tournament to decide who would go into the playoffs.
Were the Wings part of the playoff thing?
Well, yeah, they won the American Division Championship.
All right.
They would face against the Montreal Maroons, who were the best team in the Canadian division.
All right. So where's this leave us? So that was game 48. They played and they won.
So they're headed to the playoffs now in the next. That's
what's the dynamic of? Yeah, just lay that down, Matt. It's not going to happen. So what's the dynamic? I mean, because the playoffs now are like a 4-month, 40-game. It's like if you don't make the playoffs, you're like, how many teams don't make the playoffs today? 2. It's the playoffs today are much different than the playoffs then. So what were the dynamics of the playoffs back then?
Well, we'll get more into it because there's a lot to sort of dive into with it. We'll get into it for like the next week.
All right, so we'll lay that up in the whole brackets, right, of how it falls in.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into the playoff thing. Yep.
All right.
So it's enough to know that they just had this the game of their lives against Chicago. That they won the American Division Championship on the winning this incredibly important game.
And Mud was the kind of
Mud started the scoring off, and then the first line had all they had an incredible performance, and then it really ended up being the season ended up becoming what they thought it might become if they didn't win, which was that the other 3 teams all tied for second place and had to play a big playoff, sort of a initial playoff just to decide which of those 3 teams.
Was there a game 1-3-6?
But that's the thing, right? That's what I was curious about. Was there an infrastructure set up for?
No, they had to make that up on the fly to decide that 3-team bracket. Yeah,
it's like I like the let's go to New York and find out what they it's like because like now it's like it's always these let's go to New York, right, and find out what's what, right?
Yeah,
because that's the final be all word today in hockey is New York, right?
This is the era where they're kind of like making stuff up,
So
as they
all right,
go. Yeah.
So as this game was being played, they're like, oh crap. If they don't do this, they don't do this. We got a 3-way tie. What the hell do we do? And they were like,
right.
What the hell do we do? And there's like 3 guys with cigars and suits going, well, let's do this.
Yeah.
But they won it.
Yeah. So the Red Wings didn't have to worry about those 3 teams. Like but the interesting thing that we'll talk about in the next one is the idea that the one like sort of unique dynamic was that back then. The Red Wings, like the winner of each division, the 2 top teams, the first place teams, they would play each other. Now, normally in today's world, you would play the weaker team.
Yeah, number 1 seed against number 8
exactly.
seed.
Yeah. Back in this era, you play the 2 toughest teams would play each other first, which actually was a reason for controversy back in those days because they'd actually say like, why should the top 2 teams beat the crap out of each other, and then it allows the second, the next best teams to just slide in and play the best in the Stanley Cup. So that was.
And after these two guys murder each other,
exactly,
and they've injured the hell out of each other,
and that's basically what's about to happen. What we're going to get into these playoffs was that literally these two teams, the Montreal Maroons. And I Montreal Maroons disappeared in the they were one of the two teams that did not become one of the original six because they felt them and the New York Americans died during World War II. But the Montreal Maroons are like literally one of my favorite teams in the history of hockey.
Really?
They are one of.
Right.
They may be my second favorite team behind.
Because you're behind the wing. You're always with the Detroit team.
But the Montreal Maroons, they are just like the players that they had. I almost wanted to do an episode just on the players they had, but we'll factor them into it somehow because
we'll do it.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Because the players,
Charles, this is you collected this information, right? This is because. Charles, nobody on the planet knows this.
Yeah.
In one place, right?
Yeah.
I mean, people know this, people know that. There's Montreal Maroon fanatics. There's Wings fanatics, but like across the whole City of Champions things, there's nobody on the planet that knows what you know.
Well, the cool thing about the Maroons was that they. The cool thing about talking about like your team's opponents, is that it shows how good you were. The fact that when you understand how good the Montreal Maroons were,
right?
First of all, a lot of people never even heard of the Montreal.
In order to beat them,
exactly.
What did we have to beat?
The fact that they were able to overcome such an incredible, like the Montreal Maroons. I mean, they were the previous year's Stanley Cup champions.
Is there any relationship
amazing.
to the Ambassador Bridge?
No, not at all. Yeah. So they I'd love to. Yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit about them because that's they're like I say they.
Is that something we wait? Because I mean, we
can talk about it next. We can talk about it next time.
Because is that something because we got to go back to the Tigers. We got to go back to the Lions for individual players.
Yeah, we could. Yeah,
is that something we come back to and talk about like an individual thing at some point?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to get to Joe Lewis here.
Or
I'm kind of itching to get to Joe Lewis, so maybe I can do a quick little summary.
Because actually, I think Joe. I think his son, Joe Louis Barrow Jr.
Yes,
he opened up that restaurant we were telling you about, Charles. Mm-hmm. And Matt and I were hanging out with him and Johnny and his like general manager.
Yeah.
And
the food is so good.
He's coming back. There's like in June. There's June 19th is a celebration. People of color have a celebration around June 19th, and I'm 90% sure Joe's going to be back in town for that.
Fantastic.
Something and doing stuff at his restaurant in the city. So it would be cool if we were talking about his dad when he was in town. He could come hang out with us. That would actually be kind of fun.
It's but yeah, I can talk a little bit about him before we really get into the.
I mean, if we want to do that might be something we do, like the opponents.
Well, the way I wrote the screenplay, the way I wrote the screenplay itself was that that's
there
why
could be like sidebars or.
Well, the way I wrote the screenplay, the reason I think the screenplay and the movie of City of Champions has so much potential. Is that the City of Champions story serves as like season 1,
right?
And so like once you introduce this, when you're introducing the City of Champions, as we've seen, there's been so many of these like Bronco Nagurski from the Bears and like Dizzy Dean from the Cardinals. We've introduced all their opponents, at least in brief, so that like once you're done doing the City of Champions story, like if you wanted to do spin-off episodes, you could do an entire series on these different teams and different players from that era because you already have a route. There's connecting points to that story.
What built him to bring him there?
Yeah, so you could do season 2, season 2. Like you could do something on the Green Bay Packers of the 1930s, or you could do like individual episodes about different players from that era or different components of these teams.
I have thoughts about that. I'll share them with you off mic, but I have thoughts.
I'm saying because like some of the biggest sports movies that have ever been made.
Yeah.
Almost, and I will say that like
they're
this.
focused on one individual.
But almost every great sports movie ever made has been focused on nostalgic sports. On nostalgic sports, but you've got like 8 Men Out. You've got like A League of Their Own. That was in the 40s. You've got a lot of these different movies and these different, they talk about
people harkening back
to the past. And like, think about it like this, like Seabiscuit. That was 1936.
That was focused on one.
On a horse, but in the middle of the Great Depression. That same thing. On a Cinderella Man, which happens in 1935.
Right.
You've got these different, a lot of these big sports movies were happening in this era. And the reason why there's so many compelling sports stories that come out of the 1930s is because this is an era where everybody's backs were against the wall. these people were struggling through the most difficult economic hardship that the country has ever known. And out of this, so out of this comes these stories of people with their backs against the wall and emerging victorious. That's why we love those kind of stories. And that, like, the City of Champions season is like that times a million. I mean, we've seen. I mean, it's got everything, but there's other stories too in it, like Cinderella Man and Seabiscuit and these kind of stories. Those are $100 million blockbuster films. You could do entire spin-offs of just, there's so many stories that are not just necessarily Detroit that you could do entire seasons for, like a Netflix
and it's like Black Mirror, right? And how things at the end like all tie in together. All these little threads intersect.
But in this case, it's the beginning
into
because
the city
you're introducing these
into the City of Champions. All these little threads.
But it starts off at the beginning
to,
like that because they start with the interconnecting because you're already being briefly introduced to all these characters, and then in season 2 you have like maybe you do like 2 or 3 episodes on the Bears of the 1930s, or a half a season on the New York Yankees with Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig, or maybe a season or an episode on Babe Ruth, because Babe Ruth's last season in New York with the Yankees was 1934. So you do an episode on Babe Ruth's last season. You know what I mean? And you flash back to like what led him up to that point. There's so many different spin-offs that you can do.
But the story is so complex, and you have a screenplay around the complexity of that.
Right?
So it's going to take a visionary plus yourself to put all these pieces together so individuals could enjoy the story and get excited about the story at the same time.
Stories are people, and they're great people.
And I've said this before. I've said to you guys this off camera. I've said this to you guys off camera, like, this story doesn't belong to me. Like, just because I wrote about it, like, my goal was to like start like to light the
totally
fuse.
Fair.
And I'm trying to get people. That's what anybody's listening to the show. I'm trying to get people interested in this, like the teams, the Tigers. The Tigers, Lions, Red Wings. What do they got going on right now that they couldn't be involved with something like a bigger project? How much fun would the fans have?
Oh my God!
If you imagine if you go to like a game and the fans like there's like, hey, on this game we need you as extras for this movie.
Oh my God!
I mean, how cool would that be? And there's so many components like that.
And here are
in
some
Detroit, you'd fill the place. There's like so many wannabe actors.
Imagine the story.
So many wannabe actors here in the city.
We have there's many of the buildings that were used for this time.
The backdrops that are still there and look the same.
The backdrops
DAC,
are here.
the Masonic.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So you've got like the Masonic and all.
But you need to wear this hat. You have to put this hat on.
There's so many. There's
a fisherman's wharf.
There's a ton of memorable moments that take place at the Michigan Central Station when these teams were leaving for these big games and they were coming back. When the Red Wings came back as eventual Stanley Cup champions.
Holy crap, Ford underwrites the whole thing.
Yeah, they come back through the Michigan Central, and there's like this huge parade of people gathered out there for them. So, like, I mean, like, there's so many things you could do, like film on location.
Then we
and
all
how
go to
fascinated would the
Sugar
public
House.
be with updates from the media? Like, even the reporters would be interested in this because they'd be able to. This would be like the biggest. Imagine this, this epic sports film being filmed in Detroit over the course of like a year or so. This entire city would be fascinated by something like this being filmed. Yeah. That's what I mean. Like, there's so many. So what's the negative?
No, there's
the negative?
Nothing.
And movies are made
for the city.
They move. And this is what gets me. They make movies every single day about every single thing, and they spend. I mean, how many movies they spend like $100 million on that are complete flops?
I don't need another angsty.
Yeah, like
teenage movie with a girl playing a ukulele.
Like this thing has got so much.
I don't need one more girl playing the ukulele and wearing moon boots.
Okay, Mila Jovovich is hot.
Mila Vukovic is 40.
Well,
no,
okay.
I definitely
put
her in
still
movies. She's
smoking.
great, yeah.
Well, yeah, but that's going back to what you said.
But you have like guys like Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg that did like Band of
Brothers. Now we're talking about old
that
people.
did these. Well, yeah, but they did these movies. They've done a ton of 1930s and 40s movies. They love doing these sort of like period piece type movies, especially with sports and war and stuff like this that relate to the Great Depression, World War II.
Oh yeah,
like these are the type like this. There would be no shortage of interest in all this stuff.
Seriously, right now, because of the pandemic. And getting through the pandemic and then rebuilding.
Listen,
the country had to rebuild after the wars, and this is the perfect. It's a perfect timing for this. But this mood of what you have written.
But the story they wrote the story. Tom Hanks had the vision around Earth to the moon.
Yeah,
it's the same concept. It's telling the stories about the individuals that got them from point A to point B.
Well, one of the things that I found when I was kind of done with this whole thing is like, there was it's not necessarily just the players. You know what I mean? It's like it's almost like the city of Detroit itself is a character. The people of Detroit are a character. And it's like I just think that something like this, a movie that talks about this story, would just be the biggest thing. I mean, I just think that would be one of the biggest things that. Just imagine if the teams got together on this. The movie industry got a few years ago, a decade ago, they were talking about putting Detroit on the map as one of the great film producing cities in the country.
Yeah,
it's called tax incentives.
True, that's true. But at the same time, is that if you actually have a legit project here that spans the city and spans, it's like an epic sports film. Imagine
and not focus on automotive.
So when I say epic, think of a movie like your Ben-Hur type movie. A movie is a movie, but when you say epic, it means a lot of money gets spent, a lot of people are brought in, the biggest names are coming in, and imagine if all that happened here in Detroit. It would be the biggest thing to happen to Detroit in a long time.
I can imagine it. I can see it. I can envision it.
All right, Charles, we're going into the playoffs next time, right? We made it past game 48. They ended up in first, and we're hitting the playoffs.
Exactly, and we're going to talk about we're going to open up talking about the Maroons because we will do a full episode on them down the road, but you're right. Because I do want to get to Joe Lewis here because I'm itching to talk about Joe.
Oh my God, yeah.
So we will.
We got to get our buddy.
So next episode we will.
Back in here.
Yeah, so we will introduce the Maroons in the next episode and talk about this Maroons series against for the first round of the playoffs we had.
Fantastic.
All right, hell yeah. All right, so like, subscribe, follow, leave a comment wherever fine podcasts are sold, as some people would say.
And thank you, Bob.
And thanks for hanging out. Detroit City of Champions, DetroitCityOfChampions.com, and Facebook and YouTube. Thanks for hanging out. Charles, thank you. Matt, thanks for being here.
I'm happy to provide commentary.
Randy was here. Bob was here. And we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
Keep your stick on the ice. That's what I forgot. Keep your stick on the ice.
No, you didn't forget it.